Blog Talk Radio.
Hey there! Welcome to Big Blend Radio with your hosts, Lisa and Nancy, editors of BigBlendMagazine.com.
Hey everybody, welcome to Big Blend Radio with hosts Nancy Reed and Lisa Smith. We're the mother-daughter travel team and publishers of the two digital interactive publications. We've got Big Blend Radio and TV magazine. That is our travel, lifestyle, leisure, variety publication. Covers books, music, art, wine, food, travel, business, you name it. We also have Parks and Travel magazine that covers, guess what, parks and travel. And also our Love Your Parks tour, where Nancy and I are traveling across the country on a quest to visit and cover all of America's parks and public lands and share the stories of the communities, which includes literary stories, which is that really goes into our show today, which is about new books. We love that. Monday seems to be dedicated to new books that we've got to all check out. And today's show, we welcome award-winning author Sande Boritz Berger. She's going to be talking about some of the topics in her latest book. It's called Split Level, a Novel. And it's where the sexual revolution enters the Jersey suburbs and shakes up the life of a shy woman coming to terms with her own evolving identity. And, her debut novel was The Sweetness. It was a Ford Review's Indie Fab finalist for the Book of the Year, and it was also nominated for the Sophie Brody Award for the ALA. So she's been around. She's got stuff going on, and I've started reading Split Level. And let me tell you, I'm already in, and I know what's happening to me the rest of the night. I'm going to be reading it for the rest of the night. And it's a good thing. Nancy, we have this thing where we don't always – we don't want to finish the book because we'll give away too much. But Sande's book has so many topics to discuss, especially in regards to women and the changes in life and, coming of age. So everybody, go get the book, Split Level, a Novel. It's on Amazon, all those great places. But you can also go to Sande's website at SandeBoritzBerger.com. That's Sande, S-A-N-D-E. Boritz, and I may be saying this wrong too, B-O-R-I-T-Z, and Berger, B-E-R-G-E-R.com. I have to do that. We're on radio. So welcome, Sande. How are you?
I'm great. Thank you so much. I'm sorry my name is so long, but that's what happens sometimes.
Cool.
Yeah.
I like it.
Thank you. Kind of works. It kind of works, I guess. And it's hard to do. It's hard when you sign. You're signing off on your email and things. Sometimes that last word kind of hangs there, but we manage. Thank you for having me. I'm really very, very excited to be talking to a mother-daughter team. I think that's great. I could have never done this with my own mother. May she rest in peace. Never. It wouldn't have worked.
Well,
we hear
glad
that.
To have you.
We hear that so many times about mothers and daughters, and
right.
It's not. I'll be the first to admit it is not easy, but it's kind of more mothers and daughters should be able to talk, I guess.
Well, it's a generational thing, I think. Also,
You think?
I mean, my mother grew up. I think she was born in around 1920. So, and my book, pretty contemporary and kind of risque in places. It would have definitely been something that she wouldn't have read or picked. Although Peyton Place was a very popular book when she was young, and I've often wondered.
Interesting.
Sande, I wanted to touch on this because it's interesting about the ties from back then to now, and I see more and more books coming up from the era, the Vietnam War era, which is, your book is set in that time frame, and it seems like it's interesting because we have cycles in history and in life, and I feel like we're coming full circle. Even politically, everything is full circle right now. Do you feel that, and is that part of where you decided to write Split Level, or what started it?
I think I absolutely fell into that, and that was certainly not planned. And the book, Split Level, became part of the thesis that I was working on. So it was quite a while ago, and then it was originally a short story. So it was originally a short story that was published in a literary magazine, and that goes back a good 10, 15 years ago. And then I became motivated to write the second chapter, and then it evolved into a novel. And incredibly, you're 100% right, that I had no way of knowing that it would be so parallel to everything that's going on now. For example, just to give one example, to President Nixon versus what's going on in our own administration. It's just things that are happening. It's very parallel. So that was maybe luck, I guess. It's luck.
It just comes all together. But I think something stirs in us when things are going on. And it's interesting because the Me Too movement, and you go into, even like the beginning of your story, oh my gosh, the innocence and that feeling of being like Alex, being that young wife. And that whole thing of being, you want to be the perfect wife, but you also want to have your life. And Nancy, you've told me about your life as that, my mom has told me about that. And that whole thing, I remember Nancy telling me stories of, you're supposed to, this book really, Split Level goes to your generation, Nancy, and it's interesting because I remember Nancy telling me stories of women at that point, there was this book that went around and you're supposed to be, wrapped naked in saran wrap for your husband as a surprise when he comes home, and all those books and everything that you're supposed to hide, and your book starts with it, and I'm like, oh my gosh, this is crazy.
Yeah, well, it really is interesting because if you think about it, everything does come back if you wait long enough, and it is crazy. It is, but the 70s do parallel this time that we're living in, and so I can tell you one way it parallels. I'm sure you've noticed that tie-dye clothing, it's back. And when was the 70s was a big time. The music, hairstyles, but the way it's different, of course, is that so many women are in the workforce, and so many women have powerful positions, and so many women are saying what they wanted to say. But we also had leaders like that, the famous leaders of that generation that went out first before everyone. Gloria Steinem was one of the first before her. So it's and she's still doing it. She's 85 and she's still doing it. Yeah.
Well, it's a thing, it's a funny thing to be considered a minority, but something every man on earth wants. A woman, it's like, I have to have this, I have to do
Not
this,
every
I
man.
have to do that. Okay, well,
I know plenty of gay men.
Okay, but then they still need to couple. They have that. You have to have another person with you. You know what I mean? Whether it's man, woman, man, woman. There's that drive to not be alone. Let me put it that way. You don't want to be alone.
I kind of agree that men are more inclined to have a partner. I'll call it a partner. I think it's true, and maybe that comes from the mother thing, sons and mothers. But I think women, my generation is, we started talking about if your friends were married right out of college, and if you weren't, your parents began to worry about you. I graduated like in the late 60s.
Yes.
So I'm thinking you're right but it's always been that men. I think also it made them more believable in work. It made them, they felt more valuable having.
Yeah, it was kind
family,
of part of
right?
your resume. It's part of your resume. And who you married? Did you marry a doctor? Did you marry someone in the military? There was that level of, here we go to the levels, right? What level are you? on your resume as a woman. And at that time, women were doing things after Rosie the Riveter and, the World War II movement. Women were going, hey, we can do this. We're the kids of that generation. And so that, I think, World War II shifted what happened for women in the Vietnam era. Wouldn't you say, Sandy, in regards to we can do stuff, but we don't know where we're going quite yet, but we're doing it.
Yeah, World War II women, and there were a lot of them that did a lot of scenes, a lot of work behind the scenes, and they didn't, no one really knew about it. But then it was definitely after Vietnam. I think it became much more. Women were active and had a right. And they took their rights and they just marched with them, and it's changed. And it's changed now to a whole different height, and certainly politically, and who knows? I don't know what my granddaughter's generation. Well, she's only 12. I can only imagine. I have a lot of hope for that generation. Let's see what happens.
Yeah. I have to say this. I worked for this company where, at a pretty young age, I was in the human resources part of the candidate person for a new job in a national company. And it's actually pretty eye-opening, and I really didn't think about it until just like a month or two ago on a different interview. I was thinking about this company I worked for that's still a national company today. And the process of going through reading the resumes of people, okay, if you were a single male and you were applying for a job other than salesman, you went in the not so sure pile. Okay? If you were a single male applying for a salesman's job, you went in the that sounds great pile. And if you were a woman, if you weren't married, you went into, okay, if there's nothing left to look at pile.
Wow.
Yeah. And I'm just now starting to think about that.
A lot of changes.
Yeah.
A lot of
think
changes.
Think about that for a minute. So if you're a male and you're single, you're going to be a good salesman. Well, let's just your imagination run on why that would be. But if you're going to go into management, no, you need to be married and have a kid or something. Okay.
Well, you're reminding me of that show that was, and I love the show, Mad Men.
Oh, yes, I love that show.
The show Mad Men, which absolutely was, of course it was the advertising world where if you think about all the products that are advertised, and if you think about the purchasing of mostly women doing the purchasing, and here was, the advertising world was all men. And if a woman came in and, like, I think the character's name was Peggy, who had this great idea. I think it was based, actually, on the woman who came up with the ad campaign, Blondes Have More Fun. I could be wrong, but I think I heard that somewhere. Yeah. And, and so it was incredible that, that's not too long ago either. Well, I guess it was the 60s. But, so
it's still not that long ago, but I want to get into. Your book really covers all of these topics. But when you think about getting started and writing this as your second book, so I want to just kind of start with the sweetness. And I know that you've been writing all of your life, but the sweetness. Tell us, just give us an overview of that, and then going into an overview, we'll go into what. Split levels about, because let's start with that, because, and I know there's more coming on that, too.
Okay, do you want me to talk about the sweetness just briefly?
Yeah, just give everybody a little overview of that, because it's
so different
we
from
the
other. I'm looking to see if I even keep my bookmarks out on that anymore, but the sweetness was actually inspired by my family. It was inspired by them only because as a little girl I used to sit in my grandmother's kitchen like a lot of little girls, And there was always whispering, and there was always secrets. And when it got a little too loud or somebody got angry, I was always ushered into another room. But I was a great eavesdropper, so I learned to kind of lie down there and listen. And
that's funny.
And some of it was very difficult to hear because I could tell from crying that there were people that had been missing and people that were hurt. And I never really got the facts together. So I didn't have enough facts to write a memoir. And I hope that's not me because I was told everyone, do not call. And so I had to kind of find out from one aunt who was at the time 90 years old. And before she passed, she told me about this child. And I decided I would fill in the blanks and create based on this child, who actually is on the cover of the book, this little 5 or 6 year old girl. And I took that and I made up a story about what would happen on both continents. One would be Brooklyn in America and the family that has all of the secrets. And the parallel story would be the flashback to what was actually happening in Europe during the 1940s at the beginning of World War II. So,
so that's important because that give you the basis of where you can go into the Vietnam War era, that kind of helps you understand some part of that part, that past, and then now things change radically. I mean, it really did radically go into, smoking weed, Grateful Dead, all of that changed, and the war was different. You had the Korean War that people forget about, and then Vietnam. And when you think about those two, that was different than World War II. So it was really complicated. So did that help you going from that research and that story to this? It was.
I think it definitely did because I did a lot of research on that war and what it and how different the Vietnam War was from World War II, and and really just by interviewing families and actually learning more about my own family through some cousins who were older. The older cousins get the scoop, and the younger cousins don't get it. So I was so curious about it, and it also, just like the new book, Split Level, the sweetness began with a short story, also, which was published in a literary review. So I think the motivation to go further was that people liked the story, and so I said, okay, well, let's go to chapter 2, and so that's really how it evolves. I never just woke up one day and said, I'm going to write a novel, because I knew that would be a big commitment and that would be too scary for me.
But you've been writing since you were a kid, right? This is something that's been in you.
Yeah, I started writing poetry when I was very young. And I liked to write plays, and I would use my brothers. I would cast them as characters, and we would perform the plays in front of my parents when they were in their bed, and we'd come in with flashlights in their faces like it was a theater. And so that was the very beginning. And then, but when it came to college, and this is a very short story, I told my dad I wanted to go to Syracuse, because I know Syracuse had a good writing program. And I had 2 younger brothers, and I remember the moment when my father turned to me and for the first time said, no, you're going to go to nursing school, or you're going to be a teacher. Those were my choices.
Nancy,
does that sound familiar?
What happened to you? See, Nancy.
Yeah.
That's exactly what happened to Nancy.
Yeah.
Well, so I think it was that time, and I had 2 brothers, so I was devastated, but I went to a state school. I became a teacher, but I was very lucky that in those days there were wonderful professors that were not part of like the state education program. They were professors that some of them had really studied writing and were wonderful writers, poets, and everything. So that was my basis for it. I loved it, and then I went for my master's when I was 60 years old. So there you go.
That's what's interesting. You went for your master's, and it was in writing and literature, and this is after you having a company doing, writing and being a video producer.
For companies. I keep forgetting about that 20 years.
Yeah, I mean, but it's all connected because don't you think?
Funny.
I mean, we do a lot of stuff as we travel the country on our Love Your Park store. It's video this, video that, and you learn to cut the babies. Radio is great. We have a conversation. We can do whatever, wherever it goes, it goes. And you still have to watch time and still have that little whip somewhere. But with a video, you have to cut the babies. You've got, it's like you got to cut it.
Right.
And so do you think that helped you as a novelist to cut the babies and be like in editing wise? Because your novel reads fast and you're in it immediately and you're like, oh my gosh, I have the same connection. You can feel you got it and you're off and running. So
thank you.
I feel like,
thank you.
Yeah.
I think I learned that from a lot of really good teachers, too, because I once heard from the writer Stuart Onan. I was lucky to take a class with him, and he's a very good writer. He writes a lot of very male-oriented stories, but a lot of them are dark, and a lot of them are also family-oriented. And he said once that, he says, Sandy can get out of the scene faster than anyone I know. And I never realized that, but I think what happens is I have to see the scene I see it in my head, and I was just asked that over the weekend. And once I see the scene, it's easier to write it. Do you know what I'm saying? It's like I see it, I visualize it, almost like a movie, and then it's easier to write. Otherwise, I think I would have written, a 20, God knows how many thousand. I mean, most books are anywhere from 60,000 to 100,000, which is on the long side, like around 400 pages, I mean. So I try to be conservative and hold back a lot of the extra stuff, so it does move.
But, there's a thing in my mind, I call it the chase to find the exact right word. And we have a lot of words. And finding the right one, it's easy to come up with the easy word. It's hard to drill it down, and not just cut words out for the sake of an editor wants you to do that, or you don't want to print that many pages or whatever.
Right.
The chase of the exact correct word that says exactly what you're feeling and what you mean, it takes more time than writing a whole chapter.
It's a lot of work, and editing. I mean, people say, okay, so how many drafts did you really do of the book? And if you go back to the very beginning, if let's say it takes 2 to 4 years to complete a book, it could be as many as 10 drafts, And so that's I mean, it's not even that unusual from what I've heard.
I want to compare it to musicians who go through the same process in a more, how can I say, there are a bunch of people sitting in a room playing the same song and having to agree on something and find the right passage and the right tonal qualities and the right volume and who comes in when.
And they manage and it's not solitary, so that's a good thing, right?
Yeah, but they come to it a lot.
Depends.
No, and sometimes it gets really off the wall and fights, but it comes together. Sometimes I think it comes together faster than what a person does when they're writing because they're on their own.
Yeah, writers are like artists. That's the thing. Artists don't have editors, right? And then writers, this is this big book.
That's
so
a good
point.
Mm-hmm.
It's interesting. It's like every art form has a different. You have an editor. photographers, oh, you're going to have Photoshop as your editor, maybe. Don't, I don't even want to start on that. But you know, there's this process that is really interesting, and it's interesting when it's a novel. Yet at the same time, you can really you can relate to these are people's stories. You can relate to Alex Pearl. Think about her. I mean, and the artist. I'm reading it, going, Nancy, this is, you know, your life. You're married to a husband that, you know, says, hey, let's be a little open. And you're like, I'm more open than you, but in different ways. You know?
Right.
It's interesting.
You know, I like the word open. Open now equates to free sex. Yeah. As to in another conversation, open would be meaning feel free to talk freely, and whatever you say is, yes, is going to be held secure.
Yeah.
Okay. You know, and then you could just go, well, that was male, female. You know.
It's interesting because it takes place in it's interesting because the book takes place in a cul-de-sac, and a cul-de-sac. To define a cul-de-sac is kind of the opposite of open, because a cul-de-sac where they live in this community where all this canoodling would happen is a street or a passage that's closed at one end, and it's also kind of defined as a blind alley or a route that leads to nowhere. So all those definitions are so different from the openness that you were just talking about, like an open marriage, but yet the living day to day is so closed and quiet. It's
but a cul-de-sac is one way in, one way out, but everybody sees everything.
Yes.
Oh.
Yeah.
No,
that's
I mean,
wild.
Look at your houses are built on a curb, and your windows let you see your neighbors. Think about it, and
you
it's
all
funny
know each
because
other's stuff.
And living on a cul-de-sac is usually more expensive than a straight street. Well, if you want privacy, I vote for the straight street because in a cul-de-sac, that's not what you're getting, people.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I think in the book, I think it's a cul-de-sac, but I can't remember now.
Yeah, but it's interesting because it is, you know, and I remember especially in, you know, my childhood how we'd have, you know, the neighborhood was like the community, and parents and families would know each other, and then as kids we'd go like, well, that's interesting, you know, mommy's getting along with daddy over there. You know, I'm just saying, not saying it's our personal, my mom or anything, but I mean, I saw enough. There, you know, but there is. I remember this movie was, I think Sigourney Weaver was in it, where they all put like their keys in a jar.
Oh yeah. I've talked about that movie, and everyone remembers it. It was called. I just had it the other day, but I remember that at the end of the party, it was the women that threw in the keys, and the men had to pick out the keys, and they went home with someone else. Yeah, key party. They called them key parties. that was the 50s. That was the 1950s. So my book takes place in the 70s.
Oh, so that was that. See. This is
now
that's
did
weird.
It. All the generations did it.
But was it from men, Sandy? Was it the men? Was it the men that started this whole open idea?
Well, I'm sure that it's not like the women met in the kitchen and said, "Girls, you know, let's do that." I think they were more into where'd you get that dress, and the pie was delicious, and or there was probably one or two that said, you know, he slapped me again. And another one said, the newspaper boy is really hot. You know, so I think there was a mix. I mean, there was always a mix. And
this is where martinis came in later, you know. Like,
martinis.
But when you look at writing this, I want everyone to get an overview of this. I was talking about, like, this is a sexual revolution, and yet there are sexual revolutions in every era in a way, right? I mean, we've changed from cavemen and women to now. So,
Right.
Those cave days, the sexual times then really wasn't that much fun. Maybe it was. It doesn't look like it to me. But when you think about the sexual revolution and you think about what was going on, I would love you to give the audience and kind of an overview so that we don't ruin it. You give everybody the overview, especially let people know who Alex is, because I mean, I think every woman can identify with her story in some way at some point. They know they've been there. They are her at some point.
Okay. Well, the book is set as the nation recoils from Nixon, and Alex Pearl, who is about to turn 30, is also about to commit the first major transgression of her life. And she says to herself many times, why shouldn't she remain a happily contented, soon-to-be 30 housewife? And she has this lovely home in an upscale New Jersey suburb and 2 adorable daughters and a fairly charming husband named Donnie. But something just happens within her that she can no longer deny, that she craves more. And that more is what I've referred to in writing a little blurb about it, is an infusion of passion into the cul-de-sac world that she inhabits. And she's a painter, so she has a sensitivity, but she finds herself, instead of painting these beautiful canvases that she dreamed of doing, she's painting tie-dye T-shirts, which is also part of that 70s.
Cool.
Yeah, so
cool.
she feels good about herself doing that because she's doing it for money, but she has a flirtatious husband, and it's suburbia, and she begins to see him in a different light, and they meet a couple, and things begin to happen. But there's humor in the book, there's poignancy in the book, and yet there's fear in the book because she's on the brink of losing everything at a point in the book.
And how do you do that? Because you're also like, I'm going to go with him, and then it's like that fear of, there's always fear, but I think fear and humor and reality go hand in hand, because the reality gives you fear, you know it, and you know you're going to have to do something different, or you're going to stay there. It's fear on both sides, and if you don't have humor, you're screwed. It's the only way to get through it, as far as I'm concerned.
And
humor and
especially
music.
in a book like this, because you don't want to write a book like this and then get your reader furious or angry, because there has to be a story, and if they just go ahead and do it and do what they want to do, and they do it once, and there are no consequences, then you don't have a story. What you have, what makes it a story, is the struggle. What makes it a story is what happens is a surprise to certainly the protagonist, and Alex is the protagonist, and so what happens to her and what she begins to feel is surprising to her, and then surprising to everyone.
Wow. At the end of the day, humans are pretty funny.
Yeah.
I mean, they really are. And they do really funny, stupid, and smart things, and great things and horrible things. So they're pretty interesting to watch. And a cul-de-sac, I looked up cul-de-sac and what it really means, and it says it's a dead-end street, particularly one with a circle turning around at the end, and it means a vessel or tube with only one opening. It means you're at the bottom of a sack. That's freaky.
Yep, which I love. I love because I just didn't even think about. I mean, I knew I was doing a cul-de-sac, but I hadn't looked it up until I began doing book tours. Because it became a great part of a book talk.
Are you doing book
clubs? Because we pay more. No, we pay more to live in a cul-de-sac. We're like, oh, that's cool, that's cozy. And then when you really start to think about it, maybe not. Like you have to look at the same neighbors all the time.
Yeah, but it goes back to the man. Okay, I'm sorry, but it goes back to the dude who wants to have, He wants. I'm sorry. Once I've been. Look, it's happening now because people stray all the time, and I wonder. I think people can have a meaningful marriage and meaningful relationship and be together and all that good stuff. But I also think that that's kind of rare. Like I don't think it's for every. I don't know. I don't know.
65% of all marriages end in divorce.
Yeah, because look
exactly.
But wait, remember, Lisa, we were talking about how much longer we lived. Now, it used to be you were dead by 40 was old age, and you died, so you didn't have time to stray. Now we're living twice as long. Come on, people.
I see. Well, that's an interesting thing. So then by the time I'm 80, I could have like an extra 2.
Yeah. Exactly.
I don't think so.
But,
I don't know.
But it's an interesting thing. But I look at what's going on now in regards to, women being able to finally stand up and speak out. And I think we've always been able to. But I don't think...
No.
Not that it's not been accepted. No, you can always speak out, but what happens is what happens. You can
do it. They put you in that chair and they drowned you in the pond.
No, come on. That was back in the nagging days of England. But no, Sandy, really, I think this is important in regards to that we're still in that cycle today of we're still fighting that. And as women, we can't let that guard down. We can't say, hey, Gloria Steinem did this and, go back all the way back to when, hey, we were able to vote. We never wrote the Constitution. We didn't have any input in it as women. And neither did black people, neither did Indian people, So I'm just saying, so now, where are we? We need to still stand strong. And I think it's kind of that cycle has happened. It's like what we were talking about at the very beginning of this segment, I think it's important that books like yours go out there, and it's a story side of it, so that you can feel good and kind of have that emotional connection, that texture, so that you can kind of think in your own way. I think fiction it plays a really good role for right now.
Well, I think split level is a symbol. I don't, split level.
I love
actually,
that title.
When I looked up split level and I learned about it, the split level is the. It used to be the most desired home, and now it's the least desired home. If you think about a split level being so broken up, and that if you're in one, you could have 4 people in 4 different parts of the house that wouldn't have to talk. So it's incredible that today, because I did speak to real estate brokers as well, it was
funny.
just said that it's a place that's split and the people are split. And so I thought that would be why I would want that title. But marriage has always been complicated. And the only good thing that I see happening is the communication between young men and women today, whether they come out of college or they go to counseling. If there's a problem, I think that they know that they don't have to hide it. They can go to someone and speak. And so hopefully it will get better. That men, I see men, certainly I'm going to give a few points to men, because I have a husband who was, had to be taught, carefully taught, and I see him evolving. He's still evolving. So it takes a village.
Yeah, it does. It does.
Yeah.
But I also think what's interesting, I think back to South Africa when I grew up, as a teenager and preteen, and
wow.
And we have a friend, our friend Rondi. She talks about this where I can't. It's just I know it's the same as here, but South Africa is a little bit. I don't know about now because I'm not there, but it was kind of like in the 80s and 90s what the 60s and 70s was.
Right.
I
know people. Yeah, I know a whole family. My nephew's married into a South African family.
Okay,
and,
so they're 10 years behind America.
Yeah, there's a little
as far
behind
as what was
in
happening.
Right, and over there, when you talk about cul-de-sac, to me, and I'm starting to read this, I'm like, oh my gosh, I could see all my, friends' parents and moms, and they were the type. And over there we had Dutch doors, and they would be like leaning over, you need milk, you need cream here, and then everybody knew everybody's business. Everybody knew.
Oh, for sure.
And, well, they knew that in Brooklyn also. I have news for you.
I think
true.
it's everywhere. Yeah. It's everywhere.
Right.
But women have this connection, and then when it comes to now let's, see what we can do with the swapping of wives and the swapping of let's all have this little thing. That's interesting. Open relationships, that's a weird thing. It's like the elephant in the room of the women that get on together day by day. That is a whole crazy thing for women to deal with.
But I mean, that's kind of. I mean, okay. Here's an innocent question. A man will ask a woman when they come home. So, hi, dear. What did you do today? And then it's like, oh, I mopped the floor. I did this, that. That's not what they're asking. Right. They're really asking, who did you talk to? What did you learn? What's going down in the neighborhood? What do you know that I should know? Did you hear about what I just did? That's what that question means.
Wow. There's more communication. It's open. I mean, look at the media. You can't. I mean, there are people that still live in that world. But I really think everything's so open today. And,
well, now because of cell phones. I mean, now you can be like on a video you didn't even know you were in.
Exactly. Yeah. And it's happening, unfortunately, all ages, There's really very little privacy. But this was, this book was before all that. It was not the Internet. I mean, these people fell in love by sitting in a park. On a bench. So there's that, but I don't know if it's even falling in love. It's, and I don't want to give away too much of the book. But
I know.
It's really about a woman who had dreams. I think she wanted to be a happily married woman, and I think she loved her children very much. It's very evident that she loved them. But she had to live with the tapes, that she heard from the tapes that she grew up with, right? And men had this different set of tapes. And I think when the tapes finally get parallel between men and women, maybe there'll be less divorce. Maybe it will be better. So for families.
We'll maybe.
See. Yeah. I hope I'm around to see it.
So for you, writing-wise, do you make a composite of people you know, or do you go on some of your personal experiences when you write, like about Alex? Like, how do you see her? Do you visualize her? Like, this is what she looks like, and in your writing, do you talk to her? I know that sounds weird, but do you talk to her?
The craziest thing is, I was thinking about this the other day because I heard a writer talking about it. I kind of knew what was in Alex's head, but do you know that it was almost recent when I began to actually visualize her. I mean, I knew that she was going to have curly hair because it was the 70s, or I think she has curly hair, but I really never pictured her. More than that, I felt I put myself in the place of feeling what she would feel, especially being with this friend. Like in the opening, she's led around by this woman who kind of slides into suburbia perfectly. And I was talking about that yesterday when I had a reading at a library, that there's some women that can just come right in and they just feel so comfortable in that role. And maybe their mothers did too. But cul-de-sac living and women's feelings of boredom and the sameness of the suburbs, it's a rich landscape, but not everybody's happy. Some are, and just some will never be happy.
So. If you had to pick an actress to play Alex, who would it be?
Oh my goodness! Well,
now come on, this is fun.
I'm a terrible TV watcher, so I just
you can pick from like any movie star, movies, TV. It doesn't have to be someone alive now. It could be
sure. Oh my God, I would have loved Natalie Wood as Alex.
Oh yeah. Heck
I would have
yeah.
loved
Cool.
I would have loved her, you know, with a few streaks in her hair maybe.
Yes.
But because she had the sensitivity and the
Cool.
and she was also not always such a good girl. Sometimes she could be naughty.
So,
and she was also trying to break away from her family in a couple of the roles that she did.
Oh, I like that.
You know, and
Natalie, what a choice.
Who would you picture?
You know what? I keep Selma Hayek in some weird way.
Oh,
just
wow.
My husband would like her in that role.
Yeah, because she's sensitive, strong, she knows how to be a confused person, but she's always on that quest of independence in a way in her roles. So in a way, and the art thing with Frida Kahlo, you know, in a way, she can go from Frida Kahlo to tie dye, you know.
Okay.
I don't know. I just do that.
I think I'd pick Julia Roberts.
Oh.
I think because she has this capability to morph in a second's notice. Like she can. I think she can be anybody.
Yeah, she's excellent for sure.
Wow.
Yeah.
That was cool. Hey, who knows, man? I hope we'll get to that. So now, what's next for you? You know.
Well, what's next for me once I can settle down and not be visiting so much, I think I'll get back to my memoir, which is about a third done, and that's probably going to be an interesting transition. And it's scarier for sure to think about, you know, that where I want it to begin and, you know, where I want it to end. But a memoir is not your whole life. A memoir is, you know, just a part of your life that had maybe the biggest impression or influence on your future. So it won't be 8,000 words, 800,000 words. It probably will be around 250 pages, hopefully.
I think if you thought that your memoir was your whole life, you would feel like as soon as I finish this, I'm dying.
That's right.
No, I think it's hard because you have
to.
When you write a memoir, it's different than a journal, right? You have to kind of streamline it together. Of what are you trying to say? How do you stitch it together? It's a tapestry of your life, so you have to have common threads in some way. I think it's
right.
I think memoir's got to be hard.
Moment. Yeah, I think I think there's a pivotal moment. A pivotal moment that you can either reach while you're writing it, or it's the pivotal moment that begins the memoir, and then you flash back to the earlier childhood. I've read both. I love reading memoirs. I just love it. Yeah, but this has been great. I really have enjoyed this, and I'm so glad you invited me.
It's been fun. We've been all over the place. I think we've talked about everything, and we can solve the world. And would you like to see a woman president? Not saying any woman, a woman president that you would like.
This is my big question you're giving me now.
Yeah, I want to know because there's women presidents. I mean, one that you would say that is a good. You know, there's. Hey, let's elect a president that's a woman, but then there's like elect a president that's a woman that you may want as a president. There's two different things.
Well, it's definitely the candidate for me, which is who would be the best candidate first.
Right.
I really feel it would be who I think would be the best candidate. And would I love to see a woman president? I would love to see a woman president who is smart or smarter than any of the men that are running, for sure, and have, you know, most of the mass population needs, kind of ideas for them that are very progressive and yet a mix of traditional, because there's nothing wrong with a little traditional mixed in.
Absolutely.
Right?
Agree.
So I love that.
Yeah, we'll see.
Yeah.
We'll see.
Right. I love that. Yeah. Good answer. Very politically correct, too. You get 10 points for that. And then you look at today's Me Too movement. We got a song we're going to play for you. because it kind of goes with something that, your book covers that. It goes all the way through now. How do we want to be treated as women? We need to stand up for that, and also just stand up and have that platform. And it's taken time. It's taken gazillions of years. Got to think back. I go back to the caveman days when we were cave women being raped daily, So I'm just saying, let's go look at, the whole thing that's happened. So we've got a song we're going to play for you. It's called Rise. It's from Nikki Chris, and it's from her album Heartbeat. And, she's written songs like Captain America. She's done, Falling to Pieces. It's about not falling to pieces. She's done songs on shootings that have happened. She's done everything about lifting up America in every way she can think of. She's written it, and she's awesome. So we play Rise quite a bit lately for good reasons, but I want to encourage everyone to go get your book, Split Level, a novel. It's on Amazon, everybody. Now you give everybody your website. You get to spell it out this time.
Oh, I'm sorry. I missed the last question.
I said give everybody your website so everybody knows exactly where to get.
Oh, you want? Okay.
Yes, your turn.
www. Sande, Sande, Boritz is BORITZ, Berger, BERGER.com.
See, everyone? It's easy.
Cool.
See, SandeBoritzBerger.com. Go check it out. We'll also have her featured up on BlendRadioandTV.com tomorrow. So also we want to give a shout out to our friends at JKS Communications for connecting us with Sande. They're the ones who sent us on a literary assignment across America, and we're doing pretty good. We found humorists, we found James Michener, John Steinbeck in places we've gone, and apparently we're going to go to Steel Magnolia Land. And was, before it was a book, a movie, it was a book. And talk about a memoir, right? So that's our next destination. Yeah, in Natchitoches, Louisiana. So we're on quite of a joyride. Thanks, JKS Communications. They rock over there. All right, so everybody, thank you for joining us. Thank you, Sande.
Thank you so much.
SandeBoritzBerger.com. We're going to play Nikki Chris's song Rise. We'll be back on Wednesday, July 17th. 4 p.m. Pacific Time, 7 p.m. Eastern Time. You'll get to hear all about Santa Fe, our visit to Santa Fe, New Mexico. We're going to hear about Georgia O'Keeffe Museum, the Inn of Governors, and the Rail Yard Park Conservancy and Rail Yard Park over in Santa Fe, New Mexico when we were just there. You can keep up with us at BigBlendRadio.com. But here it is, Rise from Nikki Chris. Take care, Sande. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Sande.
Bye-bye.
I'm done asking for your permission. I'm tired of hearing what I can and can't do. I'm done keeping things all to myself. I'm ready to speak up. It starts with me, and it starts now. No longer a lone voice, dancing in the crowd. Time to rise up and be counted. Time to stand up and be heard. I'm gonna make you see me. I'm gonna make you hear me. It's time to rise. No more hiding in the shadow. It's time to level the playing field. I'm a warrior, I've got nerves of steel. I'm done walking through your minefield. It starts with me.